86 was right around the time where the system was changing in terms of how it provided services to particular populations. So I went in at a time where it was still, quote unquote, helpful and safe for even people of African descent. That was in the late 80s. However, it was in the early 90s where the research exploded around understanding trauma. You know, Dr. Sandra Bloom, Linda Bills, there was the sanctuary at Friends Hospital, there was work being done. Dr. Judith Herman came out with her seminal work in 1994 addressing trauma and recovery from political violence to domestic abuse, from political terror to domestic abuse, I believe it is. That was in 94. Dr. Sandra Bloom and Linda Bills came out with their works, The Sanctuary Model, around the same time, sometime in the early 90s. Now, with Dr. Bills and Sandra Bloom, I was a patient. I was a patient in the late 80s at Friends Hospital where they were gathering research information about trauma, childhood trauma and impact. So the work that Sandra Bloom was able to produce around the sanctuary model, I know I was a part, an original, part of those first cohorts of folks who were included in those studies and which helped them frame and shape the information that they had concluded based on the things that they learned from patients like myself in the mid to late 80s who were questioned and treated by them. In Friends Hospital, Dr. Linda Bills was my primary psychiatrist, and she worked very closely with my Black therapist that I had because I was outpatient and then I went in. And my therapist communicated with Dr. Bills and so forth. So upon my discharge, I followed up my work with my Black therapist, and that's how it was in the late 80s and early 90s. And much of the work that we understand and we know now about trauma and traumatic stress came from those earlier studies and work with patients like myself who wound up in the hospital back in the late 80s and early 90s, right?